Hello, everyone. My name is Kelly Dudley with the NEU Center. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, The NEU Center, How ACI is Working to Address Carbon Neutrality in Concrete. We're glad you could join us. A video recording and PDF of the presentation you're about to see will be uploaded to the NEU website, newconcrete.org, following today's webinar. Attendees are in listen-only mode. You may ask questions using the Q&A box in the Zoom platform. Our speaker will be happy to address questions at the end of the presentation. An overview of today's webinar is shown on the screen and is also listed on the NEU website with the webinar series information. Now I'd like to introduce you to our speaker. Drew was recently appointed as Executive Director of the NEU Center in July of 2022. Prior to NEU, Burns was the Executive Director of the Slag Cement Association and the Great Lakes Cement Promotion Council, where he worked with industry professionals to promote the use of more sustainable cementitious products like slag cement and Portland limestone cement. Burns obtained the Certified Association Executive Credential in 2019 from the American Society of Association Executives, one of the highest professional development achievements for association and nonprofit professionals. And now I'll hand the presentation off to Drew to get started. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Kelly. And really quickly, I'm gonna turn off my video here to help with streaming. All right, as Kelly mentioned, my name is Drew Burns, and I'm the Executive Director of NEU, an ACI Center of Excellence for Carbon Neutral Concrete. Today, we wanted to provide our members, ACI members, and the industry with an overview of why NEU was created and what we are building. But before we dive into that, I think it's important to level set on the items associated with carbon neutrality in concrete. The global issue of climate change is leading this movement towards carbon reduction and has led to our world leaders enacting policy decisions to reduce carbon emissions associated with raising our global temperature. The Paris Agreement was the first ever legally binding global climate change agreement, aiming to avoid dangerous climate change by limiting global warming with the target of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Each country, a part of this agreement, regularly tracks and reports progress on individual efforts. The US has the goal to reduce emissions 50% below 2005 levels by 2030, moving to carbon-free electricity by 2035, and achieving net zero emissions by 2050. So what do all these terms mean, and what do we mean by carbon neutrality? The term carbon represents CO2 that's released into our atmosphere. And the term carbon neutral means that there is a neutral effect of CO2 in the atmosphere. Any emissions being released must be balanced by an equal amount of CO2 being removed from the atmosphere, either through carbon sinks, carbon sequestration, or offsets. Those sinks include soil, the forest, or our oceans, and even can include concrete. But these items can only absorb so much carbon. And also, these natural sinks, like forests, release that carbon if we have a forest fire, for example. That is why we need to reduce the carbon emissions within our processes, so we can get to a more balanced or carbon neutral place. Our senior technical consultant has just drafted a paper on this subject, and we're hoping that it'll help explain these concepts a little bit more, and we're hoping that this will be available on our website within the next few weeks. So as you can see, activities associated with carbon reduction are intertwined into carbon neutrality efforts with the goal of getting to net zero or zero emissions. It's important to keep in mind here that the goal is to get to zero emissions or net zero in the long term, and potentially even negative emissions. This is already happening in some places and on some projects, like in Europe. However, the industrialized processes that we all know today have some work to do to get there. So in the meantime, we need to focus on emission reduction and carbon neutrality. So what are the basics of carbon as it relates to concrete production and placement? Well, 51 billion tons of carbon is released into our atmosphere annually, and 31% of that 51 billion tons is attributed to how we make things like cement, steel, and plastics. It's been estimated that 8% of global carbon emissions are associated with cement and concrete production. And it is also estimated that about 1.2 to 1.4 of US emissions come from cement manufacturing. About 96 million tons of cement is produced in the US annually. And the process to create that cement historically is pretty carbon intensive. When you combine the raw ingredients and heat, you get calcium oxide and carbon. There are significant advancements in reducing these emissions, so those numbers are getting better, but our goal is to continue reduction. But how will we get there? There are many different roadmaps to carbon neutrality: industry-specific roadmaps, product-specific roadmaps, regional roadmaps, etc. Now, there are a lot of opinions on this, but the Global Cement and Concrete Association has put together a roadmap to net zero carbon for the industry by 2050. And that is the best available plan our industry has currently for driving down emissions associated with our sector. They have identified 7 ways in which our industry can move toward carbon neutrality and net zero emissions, and how much of a role each of those categories play in getting there by 2050. The most impactful being carbon capture, utilization, and storage. Now, this is taking carbon either directly from the atmosphere or an industrial process and storing it so it isn't released into the atmosphere. We can either store it permanently or utilize it. Now, there's a lot of infrastructure work to be done to scale up these technologies and to make a significant impact. The GCCA roadmap notes that through 2030, those infrastructure developments should be made, and that the majority of carbon reduction impacts will take place through this method between 2030 and 2050. So in the meantime, we need to reduce and enhance our practices of concrete production. Efficiency in design and construction is the next biggest chunk to help us reduce emissions. This includes things like design optimization and site efficiency. Clinker production savings include reducing traditional limestone use, alternative fuel sources for cement production. Efficiency in concrete production includes optimizing mixture designs and industrializing manufacturing processes. Utilizing SCMs or creating savings in cement and binders will attribute to 9% of these overall reductions. The recarbonation, or utilizing concrete as a carbon sink, like I mentioned earlier, is estimated to attribute to 6% of reductions needed. And decarbonizing electricity will assist us with this process as well. On a semi-personal note, I've heard a lot of debate on the last few months getting started here with NEU on how exact these numbers are associated with various roadmaps. And while that's a valid discussion to be had, it's important to remember that this is an unprecedented challenge to our industry and to our world. Our metrics will change as we get better at doing things, and that's okay. So what's a professional to do? This information can get very overwhelming. There's a lot of information out there, and it's new to a lot of people. Concrete is a very broad and multifaceted industry. We have a lot of moving parts to producing and placing concrete, and it's hard for people within our industry to grasp and understand these complexities, let alone people outside the concrete industry. We have varying knowledge levels on these topics, on both the supply and the demand side. Lots of experts, but even more people with decision-making power that haven't had the time or the need to learn about these concepts. There's also a lot of new materials coming into the market to help move the industry toward carbon neutrality. And as these technologies come into the market, they need to be vetted for their efficacy and quickly adopted into standards, specifications, and guides to aid in their use. The American Concrete Institute last year decided to put together this Center of Excellence on carbon neutral concrete. As an organization who has influenced cultural change in the industry for over 100 years, ACI has saw the need for a center to help advance and assist efforts to address carbon neutrality in concrete. ACI is not a trade association, but is a consensus-based educational and standards organization that is uniquely positioned to drive collaboration within our broader industry. They have set up educational platforms that NEU will be able to utilize in its program development. Many professionals in the industry start building their knowledge through ACI, which makes it an ideal environment to also learn about sustainability and carbon neutrality. ACI also has a very strong student chapter network and network of international partners to help drive global efforts. And ACI is also aware of the urgency behind the changing needs of our industry regarding carbon neutrality. So that is why they created the NEU Center and launched it earlier this year. NEU has seen rapid membership growth and has had its staff expand rapidly over the last few months. And that's part of the reason why we're here today, to explain exactly what we're building with our programs and our activities. The NEU Center envisions a concrete industry where all stakeholders have access to the technologies and the knowledge that's needed to effectively and safely produce and place carbon neutral concrete and concrete products in the built environment. And we will accomplish this through our mission, which is to drive education, awareness, and adoption of the use of carbon neutral concrete materials and technologies. The core functions of NEU being developed to achieve our mission include creating a technology validation program, developing professional development opportunities and disseminating information on these new technologies, advocating for the use of sound knowledge and providing technical assistance and support to the industry, assisting ACI committees in the development of standards, guides, and language associated with carbon neutrality and concrete, accelerating the acceptance and scalability of new technology, and assisting in the development of research needed in this field. We're also planning to provide these resources in the global market and to students and new professionals as well. The technology validation aspect of what NEU is putting together is what we get the most questions about. Our industry tends to be risk adverse, and for good reason. We want to make sure that the concrete produced and placed is safe and durable. However, that apprehension often inhibits the use of innovative technologies. With a wealth of information out there, it's not easy for companies to decipher the best technology or materials to use, and good information can get lost in the shuffle. It's important to realize that as new technologies come forward, they are vetted and assessed for their efficacy so that end users are comfortable with their use. So how will it look? Organizations will be able to submit applications to the validation process to verify specific claims of their products. The validation committee will have oversight over this process. This committee will be representative of the industry and have extensive training on the program, confidentiality procedures, and the processes needed to ensure the integrity and transparency of this program. We are identifying the different technology categories that may be interested in this process and generalized criteria for each category. However, this will be an individualized process and is certainly not one size fits all. We are currently in the process of developing this program, but there will be different phases of the validation program, which include an application process and initial review to identify the scope of work for product validation. Once that's ironed out, a panel of subject matter experts relevant to the product will be formed, trained, and onboarded to the scope of work. From there, they will review product performance, the claims made, and supporting data to generate a report available to the owners and public once reviewed by the validation committee and approved. This is going to be an individualized approach with the end goal of providing a report outlining the specific claims being put forth by the applicant, identifying barriers to the use of the product, and recommendations to expedite adoption and technology transfer. As mentioned, this process is currently being built, and we will start accepting proposals in the spring of 2023. Technology transfer, or the education and dissemination of best practices associated with carbon neutral concrete, is going to be central to our success. Now, we aren't here to reinvent the wheel, but we can help push the resources available to the right audience and develop new resources as needed. Everyone in our industry needs to understand the basics of carbon neutral concrete, because otherwise we can't be advocates for our industry and help inform those making policy decisions that affect what we do. And the issue of carbon neutrality and sustainability will certainly be incorporated into everything we do over the coming years. Education programs we will be developing include short courses, webinars, and industry presentations, trainings through the ACI resource centers, carbon neutral concrete specialty days, certification programs in the future, and technology guides and information sheets, or technical guides and information sheets. The validation program and the reports generated will help feed these educational programs over the coming years and will help educate our industry on the best ways to incorporate these products to create more carbon neutral concrete. While these educational programs are being developed, there are some great tools and resources already put together. One of the best resources we have to offer are the Sustainable Concrete Guides available on our website right now, which include SCGA on applications and SCG1 strategies and examples. We are currently working on updates to these resources, and we're also working on a new edition of this series entitled Carbon Neutral Concrete Materials and Technologies that will hopefully be available by the end of this year. Additionally, we're compiling the great resources that already exist related to carbon neutrality from our allied organizations and from throughout the industry onto our website, which can be viewed at www.newconcrete.org. This will help provide a central repository for owners and end users to come to for the information on carbon neutral concrete. Today's webinar is the first in a series of webinars that we will be holding throughout this year and next to show examples and provide information on the use of carbon neutral concrete. Next month's webinar is titled An Overview of Sustainable Concrete Design and will be led by Dr. Andrea Shoker on October 18th. All of these webinars, including today's, will be recorded and available on our website, newconcrete.org. Additionally, we're working on a series of papers discussing carbon neutrality in concrete, and we hope to have one out in the next few weeks on what does carbon neutrality mean? What does carbon neutrality in concrete mean? We have also developed a series of frequently asked questions on carbon neutral concrete. There are more coming to our site soon, but facts that we currently have listed include: how does concrete manufacturing affect global carbon emissions? What are the different approaches for reducing carbon emissions in concrete? And what are the barriers to low carbon concrete? We are also in the process of planning a carbon neutral concrete specialty day taking place on the Tuesday of the Spring ACI Convention on April 4th, 2023 in San Francisco, California. During this event, we will have a variety of presentations with topics covering the Sustainable Concrete Guides, an overview of the validation program, LC3 or calcined clay cements, and others to be determined soon. The event will include lunch with attendees, new members, and staff, presentations of case studies involving low carbon concrete and high SCM replacement rates, and a panel discussion with industry professionals. We hope you can join us for this event, and more information will be coming soon, and registration will be available through the ACI Convention registration platform. ACI has long recognized that advocating for the adoption of its resources is a major component for mission success, and NEU will be very similar in that fashion. As we create more educational resources and programs, we will be advocating for their use and the use of sound technical information and the application of existing knowledge. We will keep an eye on local procurement and building code issues and assist ACI committees in developing language needed for guides, specifications, and codes associated with carbon neutrality in concrete. We will also be providing assistance and advisory services for our sustaining level members. Speaking of our members, who are the members of NEU? Well, our membership is open to companies across the value chain of concrete production and placement. What is unique about NEU is that we represent both the supply and demand side of our industry, with owners, consumers, contractors, architects, and material providers, to name a few, as our members. ACI is our founding member and is committed to funding the center for its first 5 years. Without ACI, we would not be here doing this work today. So thank you, ACI. Our sustaining level members include Meta and Breakthrough Energy. Our current supporting level member is Baker Concrete Construction, and our affiliate level members include Advancing Organizational Excellence, or AOE, the ACI Foundation, Atlantis Fiber, Carbon Built, Ash Grove, a CRH company, Cientech, Ozinga, Lehigh Hansen, and Stonecoat. We are also engaging industry associations, nonprofits, governmental agencies, and universities who are mission aligned to collaborate on our programs. Currently, we are working with the International Code Council Evaluation Services, the Inter-American Cement Federation, or FICEM, Concrete Innovation Hub in Santiago, Chile, and the National Institute of Standards and Technologies Consortium on Low Carbon Cements and Concrete. Additionally, we are also outlining our allied organization relationship with organizations like ASTM, AIA, NRMCA, ACPA, and many others. We invite industry organizations, suppliers, and end users to reach out to us to see how you can participate as a member or an allied organization as we build our programs. I'd also like to take a minute to introduce our staff and our team who is actively working on building all of our programs and activities. As you know, I am the Executive Director of the NEU Center. Dr. Andrea Shoker is our Senior Technical Consultant and Board Advisor. Kelly Dudley is our Assistant Executive Director. Dr. Sarika Sumanasoria is our Technical Director. Carrie Moosman is our Director of Marketing. And Dean Frank is our Director of Validation. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. This is shorter than the hour we had set aside for this presentation, but I wanted to make sure we had plenty of time for questions and answers. So thank you for joining us. Please check out our website, as there's a lot of good resources out there, and please follow us on our social media channels as well. With that,